The night was eerily silent, except for the occasional rustling of leaves outside the small countryside clinic. Nurse Emily sat behind the reception desk, sipping on her lukewarm coffee, trying to fight off the drowsiness creeping in. The clinic rarely saw patients this late, especially in such a remote area. She glanced at the clock, 2:17 a.m. Just as she was about to lean back in her chair, a faint scratching sound came from the glass door. At first, she ignored it, assuming it was the wind, but then the sound came again, more urgent this time. Frowning, she stood up and moved cautiously toward the entrance. As she reached the door, her breath hitched. There, standing in the dim glow of the clinic's outdoor lights, was a massive grizzly bear. Its fur was damp from the night's drizzle, its eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. But what truly stopped her cold was what stood beside the bear, a small, injured cub. The tiny creature trembled, its paw lifted slightly off the ground, a deep gash visible even in the poor lighting. Blood had matted its fur. Emily's heart pounded. She knew bears were intelligent, but this was something else. Why had the mother bear brought her cub here of all places? The nearest forest was miles away. She should have backed away. She should have called for help. But something in the bear's eyes pleaded with her. "Are you asking me to help?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The bear let out a low, rumbling sound, not aggressive, but expectant. Emily hesitated only for a second before reaching for the door handle. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked it, the soft click echoing in the silence. As she pulled the door open, the bear didn't move, only watched her with unblinking focus. The cub whimpered, shifting slightly, as if it too understood what was happening. Emily took a slow, careful step forward, her eyes flicking between the mother bear and her injured baby. Her mind raced with a million questions, but one thing was certain. This night was about to change everything. Emily's breath hitched as she crouched down, trying to get a closer look at the injured cub without making any sudden movements. The mother bear watched her every move, her massive body tense, as if ready to react at the slightest threat. Emily's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what was happening. This wild creature had brought its cub to a human for help. The cub whimpered again, its tiny body shivering in pain. Emily could now see the wound more clearly, a deep gash along its foreleg, likely from a sharp rock or possibly even a trap. Her stomach twisted at the thought. Had someone deliberately hurt this little one? She swallowed hard and forced herself to stay calm. Think, Emily, think. She was trained to handle emergencies, but this was beyond anything she had ever faced. Normally, she would sedate an animal before treating it, but she had nothing strong enough for a bear cub, let alone its mother. If she made one wrong move, things could turn deadly. Gently, she reached out a hand, palm up, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. "It's okay, little guy," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just need to see how bad it is." The mother bear let out a low, throaty sound. Not a growl, but something closer to a warning. Emily froze, her heart hammered. Was she about to be attacked? Then something unbelievable happened. The bear lifted her massive paw and nudged the cub forward, just slightly. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Emily could hardly believe it. The mother bear wanted her to help. Carefully, she shifted forward on her knees, keeping her breathing steady. The cub sniffed the air, its tiny nostrils flaring. It looked scared, its small, round eyes darting between Emily and its mother. Emily reached into her pocket and pulled out a sterile gauze pad, dabbing it in the antiseptic she always carried with her. "This is going to sting," she whispered. The moment the pad touched the wound, the cub let out a sharp cry. Emily flinched, but she didn't pull away. The mother bear growled, stepping forward instinctively, and Emily's entire body stiffened. Please, she whispered, not even sure if the bear could understand her. I have to clean it. The bear's eyes burned into hers for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, she stepped back. Emily released the breath she didn't even realize she was holding. She worked as fast as she could, wiping away the dirt and dried blood. The wound was deep, but not fatal. If it had been left untreated, though, infection could have set in. And in the wild, an infected wound was a death sentence. She needed to wrap it up, but she couldn't do it alone. The cub wouldn't sit still long enough. Emily bit her lip, then made a risky decision. She looked up at the mother bear. I need you to hold him still. It was ridiculous. It was insane. She was talking to a bear like it was a person. But then the bear did something that sent chills down Emily's spine. She lowered her head and placed a massive paw gently on the cub's back, keeping it in place. Emily's fingers fumbled as she quickly wrapped the bandage around the cub's wound, securing it as best as she could. The cub let out soft whimpers, but didn't struggle anymore. The mother bear had made sure of that. Emily sat back on her heels, exhaling shakily. Done, she said, barely believing it herself. I did it. For the first time, the mother bear's muscles seemed to relax. She released the cub, who hesitantly placed its paw on the ground. It winced, but didn't collapse. A good sign. Emily had done what she could. Now it was up to nature to do the rest. But just as she started to ease back toward the clinic door, a question hit her like a lightning bolt. How did the bear know to come here? It wasn't like wild animals understood human buildings or the concept of medicine. So why had this mother bear brought her baby to a clinic in the middle of the night, trusting a human with its life? Emily's mind raced. Had this happened before? Had she met this bear before? She tried to remember, but before she could piece it together, the mother bear did something that made her blood run cold. She turned her head slightly and let out a low, sorrowful whimper. Not a growl, not a warning. A sound of pain. Emily's stomach dropped. She had been so focused on the cub that she hadn't noticed it before. But now, under the glow of the clinic lights, she saw it. A dark stain on the bear's fur. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The mother was injured too, and this wound was much, much worse. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears as she stared at the dark stain spreading across the mother bear's fur. The realization hit her like a freight train. She wasn't just here for the cub, she was injured too. Her gaze darted back to the bear's massive frame. The cub, now bandaged and slightly calmer, pressed against its mother's leg, oblivious to the danger that still lingered. Emily's instincts screamed at her to step back, to put distance between herself and the wounded predator. But she couldn't. She had to know. Slowly, she lifted her eyes to the bear's face. You're hurt, aren't you? Her voice was barely above a whisper. The bear didn't move, didn't growl, didn't flinch. She simply stood there, towering over Emily, her breathing slow but labored. Emily's fingers trembled as she cautiously leaned to the side, trying to get a clearer look. The wound was on the bear's left side, just beneath the thick fur of her shoulder. Blood had matted the coarse hairs, the dark red standing out against the golden-brown coat. She swallowed hard. A wound this size. It wasn't from a fall or a fight with another animal. This was something else, something deliberate. A bullet wound. Emily's stomach turned. Someone had shot this bear. 1,000 thoughts flooded her mind at once. Poachers. A hunter who fired out of fear. Or worse, someone who had been aiming for the cub and hit the mother instead. Her fingers instinctively curled into fists. Who would do something like this? The bear swayed slightly on her feet, the strain of her injury catching up to her. The cub let out a distressed sound, pressing its small body tighter against her, as if willing her to stay upright. Emily didn't think. She acted. I need to help you, she said, her voice steadier now. She didn't know if the bear could understand her words, but something in her gut told her the mother already understood everything. The bear blinked, her massive chest rising and falling with deep, tired breaths. Then, incredibly, unbelievably, she took a step forward. Emily sucked in a sharp breath as the bear closed the gap between them. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to run. A wounded animal was the most dangerous kind, but her instincts told her otherwise. This bear had already made a choice. She had trusted Emily with her cub. Now she was trusting her with her own life. Carefully, Emily reached out. The warmth of the bear's fur surprised her, despite the dampness from the night air. She ran her hand lightly over the wound, feeling the heat radiating from the torn flesh. It was infected. If she didn't treat it now, the mother bear wouldn't last long. "I need to get supplies," she said, more to herself than the bear. Her mind raced. How was she supposed to treat something like this? Sedation was impossible. Stitches? No way. The best she could do was clean the wound, stop the bleeding, and pray the infection didn't spread. Her eyes flicked to the clinic door. Could she get inside and grab the supplies before the bear lost patience? Emily took a slow step backward. The bear's ears twitched, but she didn't move. Another step, then another. The cub let out a small noise, but the mother remained still, her dark eyes locked onto Emily's every motion. When she reached the clinic door, she moved quickly, yanking it open and rushing inside. Her hands flew over the shelves, grabbing antiseptics, bandages, a clean towel, anything that might help. Her mind worked on autopilot, years of medical training kicking in. She had treated gunshot wounds before, but never on a bear. She shoved everything into a small bag and hurried back outside, half expecting to find the bear gone. But she was still there, waiting. Emily dropped to her knees, opening the bag and pulling out the antiseptic. She hesitated only for a moment before speaking softly. "This is going to hurt. A lot." The bear didn't move. Emily took that as permission. She pressed the soaked cloth against the wound, and all hell broke loose. The mother bear roared, a deep, earth-shaking sound that sent every hair on Emily's body standing on end. The cub cried out, darting behind its mother in fear. The sheer force of the bear's growl made Emily's hands tremble, but she didn't stop. I know," she gasped. "I have to do this. Just hold on." The bear's massive claws dug into the dirt, her muscles tensing as if she was about to lash out. But she didn't. She didn't move. She was letting Emily help her. Emily's hands worked as fast as they could, cleaning the wound, wiping away the dried blood. The bullet wasn't lodged inside, a miracle in itself. Whoever had shot her had either grazed her or the bullet had gone straight through. Emily reached for the bandages, wrapping the wound as best as she could. The bear's body shuddered under her touch, her heavy breaths uneven. Emily felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. This wasn't just about helping an animal anymore. This bear had trusted her, and now she had to make sure that trust wasn't in vain. As she tied off the last bandage, she sat back, her heart pounding. "That's all I can do," she whispered. The bear exhaled a slow, deep breath. Then, as if sensing the ordeal was over, she lowered her massive body onto the ground, her cub crawling immediately to her side. Emily sat there, staring at them. What now? Would they just leave? Or did this bear know something she didn't? Then, out of the corner of her eye, something caught her attention. Movement in the trees. Emily stiffened, every nerve in her body suddenly on high alert. She wasn't alone. Someone else was out there, and something told her. They were the reason the bear had been shot. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she locked onto the shadowy movement in the trees. Her pulse pounded in her ears, drowning out everything else. Someone was watching. The mother bear, though exhausted, lifted her head slightly, her ears twitching toward the noise. The cub, sensing its mother's tension, pressed itself closer to her side, its small body trembling. Emily's mind raced. Had the shooter come back? Were they looking for the bear? Or worse, had they seen her helping it? She forced herself to move, shifting just enough to reach into her bag. Her fingers fumbled around until they found what she was looking for, her phone. No service, of course. The clinic was in the middle of nowhere. A twig snapped. Emily's eyes darted toward the tree line. Too close. Whoever was out there wasn't just passing by. They were waiting, watching. She had to do something. She couldn't just sit there and hope for the best. Her gaze flicked to the mother bear. The bandage around her wound was already darkening with blood, but she wasn't moving. Was she too weak, too hurt? Could she even defend herself if it came to that? Emily swallowed hard. She needed to make a decision, fast. She turned slightly, angling her body so she could whisper to the bear. It was ridiculous, but at this point she didn't care. "You need to go," she murmured, barely audible. "Take your cub and leave. Now." The bear's dark eyes met hers. There was something unsettling in them. Not fear, but understanding. Then, before Emily could react, the mother bear did something that sent ice through her veins. She stood up. Despite her injury, despite the pain, the bear pushed herself to her feet, her massive body towering over Emily once more. She let out a deep, guttural sound. Not a growl, but something close. A warning. The movement in the trees stopped. Emily's stomach twisted. Whoever was out there had just realized their mistake. She shifted slightly, trying to catch a glimpse of their face, but it was too dark. All she saw was a faint glimmer, a metallic reflection. Her breath hitched. A gun. Her body tensed as she fought the instinct to run. If they were armed, running wouldn't save her. The mother bear took another step forward, her muscles tensing. The cub whimpered but didn't move from her side. The tension in the air was suffocating, pressing down on Emily like a weight she couldn't shake. Then, another sound. A voice, a low, rough whisper from the trees. "She's still alive." Emily's blood ran cold. They weren't talking about her. They were talking about the bear. She had no time to think, no time to panic. She had to act. Now, summoning every ounce of courage she had left, she did something reckless. She stood up. The moment she moved, the bear let out a deep, resonating growl, a real one this time. A threat, a promise. Emily didn't look at her. Instead, she took a single step forward, toward the trees, toward the danger, and she spoke. "I don't know who you are," she said, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine, "but I know what you did." Silence. She forced herself to keep going. If she showed weakness, it was over. "This bear isn't a threat to you," she continued, carefully choosing her words. "She came here for help. You've already done enough damage. Walk away, now." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the metallic glint shifted, a gun being lowered. Emily's breath came in short, uneven bursts. The shadowy figure hesitated, then retreated. The crunch of boots on leaves grew softer, fading deeper into the woods. They were leaving. She didn't dare move, not yet, not until she was sure. Several agonizing seconds passed. Then the night was quiet again. Emily exhaled shakily, her entire body trembling. The bear, as if sensing the danger had passed, let out a low rumble before sinking back down onto the ground, exhausted. The cub curled into her side once more, its tiny eyes barely staying open. Emily swallowed hard. She had just stared down a gunman and survived. But something told her this wasn't over. She crouched beside the bear again, pressing a gentle hand to her fur. "We need to get you somewhere safe," she whispered, "because if those men had been hunting the bear, they would come back, and next time, they wouldn't leave empty-handed." Emily knew she had little time. Whoever those men were, they had backed off for now, but they would return. And next time, they wouldn't be so easily intimidated. She glanced at the mother bear, her massive body resting heavily on the ground. Her breaths were slow, labored, and her injured side rose and fell unevenly. She needed rest, but staying here was too dangerous. Emily's mind raced. How could she move a wounded bear? The cub was small enough to carry if necessary, but the mother? That was impossible. Her clinic wasn't equipped to shelter an animal this large. And even if it were, the moment those men returned, they'd come armed and ready. She had to get the bears somewhere safe, somewhere the hunters wouldn't find them. Her eyes darted to the forest, the sanctuary. It was a few miles away, deeper into the woods, a protected zone where poaching was illegal. If she could just get them there, the bear and her cub would have a real chance at survival. She took a deep breath. There was no other choice. Emily turned back to the bear, speaking softly. "You have to trust me one more time." The bear lifted her head, exhaustion in her dark eyes. But she listened. Emily grabbed her bag, making sure she had enough supplies for the journey. Then carefully she reached out and nudged the cub. "Come on, little one." The cub let out a soft whimper but obeyed, stepping hesitantly beside her. Now the hard part. Emily shifted to the mother bear's side. The wound still looked bad, but she needed to stand. Emily pressed a gentle hand against her. "I know it hurts," she whispered, "but you have to move. You can't stay here." For a moment, the bear didn't react. Then, with visible effort, she pushed herself up. Emily stepped back, watching as the bear staggered slightly before steadying herself. The cub immediately rushed to her side, pressing against her for support. Emily exhaled in relief. She was strong, wounded but strong. Now they just had to make it to the sanctuary. She led the way, moving cautiously through the trees. The mother bear followed, her steps slow but determined. The cub stayed close, its small paws rustling against the leaves. The night was eerily quiet. Every crack of a branch, every distant rustle made Emily's heart pound. Were the men still nearby, watching? They walked for nearly an hour, the tension never leaving Emily's body. Every step felt like a risk. Then finally she saw it. A break in the trees, the fence marking the start of the sanctuary's borders. Relief flooded her chest. "We're almost there," she whispered. She quickened her pace, glancing back at the bear. The exhaustion in her eyes was clear, but they had made it. Emily reached the fence and carefully unlatched the gate. She stepped aside, motioning toward the open path. "Go," she said softly. "You're safe now." The mother bear hesitated. For the first time since the night began, Emily wasn't sure what she would do. Would she leave? Stay? Then slowly the bear stepped forward. She walked past Emily, moving into the sanctuary with careful, deliberate steps. The cub followed, casting one last glance at Emily before disappearing into the trees. Emily stood there, watching them go, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't fully explain. She had done everything she could. Now it was up to them. As she latched the gate behind them, a sense of peace settled over her. The bear had trusted her, and she had done what was right. Moral message: Emily's encounter with the bear wasn't just about saving an injured animal. It was about the unspoken bond between humans and nature. In a world where humans often see wildlife as a threat or a trophy, this story reminds us that every creature feels pain, seeks help, and trusts when given a reason to. Poaching, hunting for sport, and harming animals for selfish reasons are acts of cruelty that disrupt nature's balance. But kindness, compassion, and the willingness to protect those who cannot speak for themselves, that is what makes us truly human. If a wild bear can trust a human with her life, then maybe, just maybe, we can learn to live in harmony with the world around us.